Accelerating subsurface strategy with Nasuni and AWS is causing seismic shifts. Get ready for this AWS Energy Symposium exclusive interview. To discuss this transformative approach, we're joined by Capello, Field CTO at Nasuni, who brings deep expertise in cloud storage and data management. When we're looking at Nasuni, give us like a high-level overview of what Nasuni does.
Sure. Think of Nasuni as a way of accessing your very large data sets. In this case, we're talking about subsurface or seismic data. But it doesn't matter where you are when you want to access that data set. You could be on-premise, you could be in the cloud, you could be across different regions. It's the same data set you're accessing, even though it can exist in multiple locations.
Why is rapid data access rather than just storage capacity now the critical battleground for agility and upstream operations?
That's a great question. It really has a lot to do with things that are happening outside of storage right now. One of the most exciting things that's going on in the industry today, whether it's within energy or pretty much across any industry that is leveraging large-scale data sets, one of the most exciting things is the way that compute is really accelerating our way of getting insights. And that's everything from new AI workflows to more sophisticated GPUs to be able to analyze data. But the challenge is the availability of those compute resources. And so traditionally, you would put your data next to where your compute is. You would make that decision, and that decision would basically remain for years. Now the challenge is that if you want access to those high-performance compute, you want access to the latest and greatest when it comes to either AI workflows or compute, you don't know where that availability is going to be. So the key in that case is now we've got to make sure that my data can be available wherever the compute's available, where it becomes portable. So rather than the challenge of like, how can I store lots and lots of data at scale? It's that challenge still. But the second challenge is now how can I make that available wherever the compute's available? So it's portability as well as scalability.
Does this also impact breaking down those silos? We're seeing that a lot in the energy industry.
It's exactly right, exactly right. So you can think of the portability problem is just another way of thinking about how can I get access to data to whomever needs it, whether it's compute or whether it's an organizational barrier. But the idea that the data can be available wherever you need it, but it's available to be stored at scale. That's the really critical challenge. Another point on the scalability piece, this is why AWS is so strong in any kind of workload that involves like large scale data sets. S3 is the most scalable, most economical, most durable, geo-redundant storage system that exists today. And so any strategy really has to have that at the core. One of the things you want from that though is to make it accessible in a way using the protocols that your applications are used to be able to access that. And so the marriage between Nasuni and AWS is that we take S3 scalability and durability, and we make sure we can store files at scale, file systems at scale, but you can still access them like you're accessing a file. So it's not like I need a new set of protocols. I don't have to modernize my app to be able to get to my data.
Oh, that's very unique, I feel.
It's a different approach to how people use object storage. Object storage, in a lot of ways, is considered to be a place where I store my data, and my data, like every object equals a file. In our world, we think of the object store as a place to be able to store not just the files, but all the file system data too. And that means that I can create an access point into that system that can leverage object store, but still allow for the file system components to it.
Let's talk about the consolidation of timelines as well. I mean,
sure.
Consolidating timelines by 3 to 6 weeks is a huge gain. Could you explain how Nasuni and AWS specifically achieve that elimination of time spent?
Yeah, there's a common customer of ours, Fugro, which came to us because they wanted to be able to store all of their seismic data in a way that could be available to wherever they wanted to process it. And one of their challenges was trying to minimize the amount of on-premise hardware that they would need for that, while taking advantage of the fact that they wanted to be able to process data that was ingested one place somewhere else. And so when we talk about that compression of those timelines, a lot of it comes from the fact that we will ingest a lot of this seismic data. we will put it into S3 almost immediately. So think of Nasuni as this like cache, this place I can like write a bunch of my data to, and then I can transform it into objects. Once it's transformed into objects inside of S3, any other cache can then present out that data. That right there saves an incredible amount of time. Traditionally, what would happen is you would set up one piece of infrastructure in one location where I ingest the data, and then I would recreate that same infrastructure somewhere else.
Oh, God.
And if you're talking about petabyte scale data, that's a lot of data. It's a lot of hardware in different
Absolutely.
locations. So we just have small pieces of infrastructure to ingest the data, to be a cache that you can work off of the data, and then we can put those caches wherever you want to be able to process it. So that's where we saw a lot of those timeline savings.
Now, beyond just the technical efficiencies, which I feel like we've kind of dived really into,
Sure.
what's the quantifiable economic impact of accelerating these seismic workflows?
We've seen everything from across different customer bases, being able to save $1 million a day is a good example. A customer that was able to recover when a disaster happened and be able to get their data up and running faster. And the reason for that is the fact that AWS is this durable copy of the data. The gold copy is inside of S3. But the place you access your data are these Nasuni caches, which are smaller. In a traditional, and this one case I'm talking about with this customer, when they've had disasters before and they've had to rebuild the infrastructure to be able to access the data, it would take days, sometimes even weeks, to be able to rebuild that infrastructure. Today, because it's such a small piece of infrastructure on premise, this Nasuni cache, you can do that in literally like minutes to hours.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where you save a lot of time, because the time that the infrastructure is down means that all the operations then are usually either like compromised or put on hold.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, when we're talking about delays, anything that's delayed, I mean, it costs more money, it costs more time, it's like more
So many
people.
things fall from that. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So can you help us understand the actual cost of delays? I mean, you've kind of touched on it there, but let's go a little bit more into like the offshore rig costs and the capital efficiency gain from faster time to first oil.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so again, that kind of $1 million a day was one that we see show up in different customers when they think about like what happens if I no longer have access to my data. That's usually a good one. When it comes to what's happening on the rigs as well, you can imagine if I can't ingest the data fast enough, or if I can't actually move the data soon enough, it's going to then have all these effects downstream as well. To the point about the infrastructure, there's a really the number we kind of like look to is that we generally see the reduction of that footprint by about 80%. So if your total infrastructure spend on-prem right now is say, $4 million, you're probably going to be able to save about 3.2 by reducing it down to a smaller footprint just with the Nasuni caches. And that's really on the storage piece. That's about not having an infrastructure that has to handle all of the seismic data. And this is where AWS really comes into play, because when it gets to when you write to a Nasuni cache, we immediately push that out into S3. That means that you don't have to have the entire data set on-prem. That means you don't have that entire infrastructure on-prem. That's where that 80% comes in, the 80% reduction.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer, right? What would be a hesitancy or challenge of somebody getting started with Nasuni and AWS?
It usually comes down to like usually comes down to cultural things. If you're ready for that transformation, if you're ready to put that data into the cloud. A lot of our customers are worried about security. A lot of them are worried about just being able to extend their network to the cloud. One thing we do to help with that is we make sure that every time the data moves from the Nasuni appliance into the cloud, it's encrypted with encryption keys that the customer owns.
Okay.
And it's all being put into a S3 bucket within their tenant, within their AWS environment. So those are ways in which we try to minimize the concerns about moving to the cloud. I think some of the other issues are just around there's a lot that goes into decommissioning older systems,
Right.
especially when they are kind of far afield. So we've got customers who have worked to sort of reimagine, to modernize their operations in say like in the Congo. Just being able to get out there and to be able to make those changes is one of the pieces of friction that we have to help customers be a little bit, to make it a little bit easier for them to be able to make those changes.
Absolutely. Well, now we've talked about those challenges and hesitancy, but let's talk about those that are already invested and in it.
Sure.
How do you help those customers get future ready for AI modeling?
Yeah, so this is, we kind of leverage the same thing I was saying about multi-location when you're processing the data. So that same idea that I have all the data inside of S3 and now I can present it wherever I want really holds true for AWS for the AI workflows as well. So it doesn't really matter where the either your installation of Bedrock is. It doesn't really matter where you might have your AI workflow set up inside of AWS. As long as you have a Nasuni cache that you can present to it, which is basically an EC2 instance running our software, you can present out any volume of data that you want. So the great thing is you could have a Nasuni cache that is being analyzed by Bedrock, and that cache could be, say, 10 terabytes, but it's actually presenting out a 1 petabyte volume. And so you use this cache to be able to basically push data into these AI pipelines. The other thing is AWS has come up with these really great innovations around how you access data from the S3 object store as well. And we're one of the first ISVs to really take advantage of that. And we're going to be doing more with this one technology called Object Lambda. And so what Object Lambda does is it says, instead of an S3 endpoint to get my data, we'll have a special Nasuni S3 endpoint. And it'll be a faster way to be able to take all the data that's encrypted and stored in the Nasuni way to be able to make that available to AI pipelines.
Wow. I mean, such an innovative approach. Do you think that this is going to continue to change the energy industry as a whole?
Anything that helps store data at scale and move data at scale is going to help any of the processes that we've been talking about at this conference today. Anything that allows us to be able to put that bridge between the old way of accessing data and the new way of accessing data will help to accelerate processes. And we believe Nasuni is right in the middle of all that because we leverage AWS for the scale and the durability, and we have our own innovation so that you can talk to your data the same way you've talked to it before using file protocols, but also you can move your data to any location that you want, whether it's on-prem or it's in the cloud. So we think that anyone that is focused on scalability, portability, and this kind of bridge to the on-prem world is really going to help transform the energy industry.
If someone's on the fence and they want to get started, but maybe first they need to have that conversation, how do they get in touch with you or someone at Nasuni?
Always just go to Nasuni.com. Always go to your AWS rep as well. If you go to anyone on the AWS side who is, well, anyone really knows Nasuni because we're one of the top ISVs at Nasuni, or at AWS. Working through AWS as well is a great way for us to make sure that we're all coordinated around what makes sense for you and what, like, especially to your point, where's the best place to start? How should we be thinking about this as a journey towards this broader transformation? And we can help with that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the time today, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're interested in partnering with Nasuni and AWS, find your AWS rep or visit Nasuni.com.